The wind howled like a wounded wolf across the Wyoming territory, driving snow against the weathered logs of Eli Mercer's cabin. It was December 1876, and the worst blizzard in a decade had descended upon the valley, turning the world into a churning white void where sky and earth became one. Eli sat by his stone fireplace, watching flames dance across split pine logs, his calloused hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee, the steam rising like ghosts in the amber light. At 34, he bore the marks of a hard life, a scar along his jaw from a knife fight in Cheyenne, weathered skin from years under the prairie sun, and eyes that held shadows of things he'd rather forget. 5 years had passed since he'd hung up his gun belt and taken up ranching. 5 years of raising cattle, mending fences, and keeping to himself. The townsfolk in Sweetwater knew him as the quiet rancher who lived alone in the hills, but they didn't know about the notches on the Colt .45 he kept wrapped in oilcloth beneath his bed. 23 notches. 23 men who'd tested his draw and lost. The cabin groaned under the wind's assault. Eli had built its solid thick logs, chinked with mud and moss, a steep roof to shed snow, shutters that could be barred against more than just weather. It was a fortress of solitude, exactly how he wanted it. Then came the knocking. At first, he thought it was a branch hitting the door. The cottonwood sometimes dropped limbs in storms like this. But the rhythm was too regular, too desperate. 3 quick raps, a pause, then 3 more. Eli set down his coffee and reached for the Winchester propped against the wall. Old habits died hard in the territory. He approached the door slowly, rifle at the ready. "Who's there?" His voice was rough from disuse. Days could pass without him speaking to anyone but his horse. "Please," a woman's voice, barely audible over the storm. "Please, I need help." Eli hesitated. Could be a trick. He'd known men who used women as bait for ambushes. But something in that voice, the genuine terror mixed with exhaustion, made him lift the heavy bar. He opened the door to a swirl of snow and a figure that nearly collapsed into his arms. She was wrapped in what might have once been a fine traveling cloak, now soaked and frozen. Ice crystals clung to dark hair that had escaped from beneath her hood. When she lifted her face, he saw eyes the color of spring sage, wide with cold and fear. "Thank God," she whispered, and then her knees buckled. Eli caught her, his rifle clattering to the floor. She weighed almost nothing, like a bird made of cloth and ice. He kicked the door shut with his boot and half-carried, half-dragged her to the fireplace. "Easy now," he said, settling her into his only good chair. "You're safe." Her teeth chattered so hard he feared they might break, with practiced efficiency. He stoked the fire higher and fetched blankets from his bed. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 25, with fine features that spoke of Eastern breeding despite her current state. "My horse," she managed through blue lips. "Dead, miles back." "Storm will have covered it by now." Eli wrapped the blankets around her shoulders. "Nothing to be done." He busied himself making tea, giving her privacy to compose herself while stealing glances at this unexpected guest. Her dress, visible beneath the ruined cloak, was silk wedding silk. He realized with a start. Ivory-colored, with pearl buttons and delicate lace that had no business being in Wyoming territory in December. "What's your name?" he asked, handing her the steaming cup. "Margaret Doyle." Her hands shook as she took it. "Maggie. And you?" "Eli Mercer." He pulled up a wooden stool, keeping distance between them. "You're a long way from anywhere in this weather. Miss Doyle." "Mrs. Doyle," she corrected, then laughed bitterly. "No, I suppose it's Miss again. Or maybe it never changed at all." The story came out in pieces between sips of tea. She'd come from Chicago as a mail-order bride for Owen Blackledge, the wealthiest rancher in 3 counties. The wedding was to have been that morning at his ranch, but when she'd arrived after weeks of travel, she'd discovered the truth about her intended. "The other women at the ranch, they tried to warn me quietly," she said, staring into the fire. The bruises they carried, the fear in their eyes. When I told Mr. Blackledge I'd changed my mind, he laughed, said I was bought and paid for, like cattle, said I'd learn my place soon enough. Eli's jaw tightened. He knew Owen Blackledge by reputation, a man who'd built his empire on others' misfortune, who treated everything and everyone as property to be owned and used. So you ran. In my wedding dress, like a fool. Maggie pulled the blankets tighter. I stole a horse from his stable, made it maybe 10 miles before the poor creature gave out. I've been walking for hours, if you hadn't answered. She didn't need to finish. The storm would have claimed her by morning, leaving her frozen body to be found come spring thaw. Blackledge will come looking. Eli said it wasn't a question. Yes, fear flickered across her features. He doesn't like losing what he considers his. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought this trouble to your door. When the storm passes, I'll leave. To go where? She had no answer for that. No money, no family in the territory, no horse. Her choices were stark freeze in the wilderness, return to Blackledge, or throw herself on the mercy of a town that would see her as a runaway bride and fallen woman. Eli stood and moved to the window, peering through the shutters at the white fury outside. 3 days, maybe 4 before the storm would break. 3 days with this woman in his one-room cabin. He'd chosen isolation to escape complications. Yet here sat the biggest complication imaginable. You'll stay until the weather clears, he said finally. Then we'll figure out what's to be done. I can't impose. Wasn't a question. His tone brooked no argument. I've got salt pork and beans enough. You can have the bed. I'll take the floor by the fire. Tears welled in her green eyes. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Eli turned from the window, studying her face in the firelight. He saw strength there beneath the current fear, a steel spine that had given her courage to run. It reminded him of another woman, long ago, who'd had that same desperate bravery, but she hadn't found help in time. Man turns away someone in need during a storm like this. He's no man at all, he said simply. Maggie nodded, accepting this mountain hospitality. As she sipped her tea, color slowly returned to her cheeks. The firelight caught the mahogany highlights in her dark hair, and Eli found himself noticing the graceful curve of her neck, the delicate way she held the rough tin cup. He mentally shook himself. 5 years of solitude had made him foolish. This woman was trouble-walking, pursued by a powerful man, alone and vulnerable. The last thing she needed was another man looking at her with interest. The last thing he needed was to care about anyone again. You should rest, he said gruffly, moving to prepare the bed. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. As Maggie settled into his bed, still wrapped in blankets, she watched him arrange his own sleeping spot by the fire. Mr. Mercer, thank you. I know what risk you're taking. Eli didn't respond, but as he lay on the hard floor listening to the storm rage outside, he wondered if she truly understood. Owen Blackledge had money, men, and influence. He owned the sheriff in Sweetwater and half the territory judges. When he came for his runaway bride and he would come, there would be hell to pay. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, there was only the storm, the fire, and the quiet breathing of the woman who'd stumbled into his carefully constructed solitude. As sleep finally took him, Eli's last thought was that his lonely fortress had been breached not by violence, but by a pair of sage-green eyes and a knock in the night. The blizzard continued its assault on the cabin, but inside, 2 strangers shared warmth and safety, unaware that their meeting would change both their lives forever. In the morning, they would need to face the reality of their situation, but for now, in the depths of a Wyoming winter night, it was enough to simply survive. The fire crackled and sparked, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind sang its lonesome song across the empty plains, while inside, for the first time in years, Eli Mercer's cabin held more than just one solitary soul. Dawn came late and gray, the storm still raging beyond the cabin walls. Eli woke to find Maggie already up, tending the fire with practiced movements that surprised him. She'd found his coffee pot and had a fresh brew going, the rich aroma filling the small space. "Morning," she said without turning. "I hope you don't mind. I couldn't sleep." Eli sat up, his back protesting from the night on the hard floor. In the pale light, he could see she'd attempted to tidy her appearance. Her dark hair was now braided, the wedding dress replaced by one of his spare shirts and a pair of trousers cinched tight with rope. The clothes swallowed her small frame, but she wore them with dignity. "Suits you better than silk and lace," he said, accepting the cup she offered. A smile ghosted across her lips. "I have always preferred practical clothes. Mother would be scandalized." The smile faded. Was scandalized. She died thinking I'd made a respectable match. They settled into an awkward rhythm as the morning progressed. The storm showed no signs of breaking, sealing them in their small world of firelight and shadow. Eli went about his usual tasks, checking his ammunition, mending a bridle, sharpening his knives while Maggie insisted on earning her keep. "I'm not some delicate flower," she said when he protested her doing chores. "I grew up on a farm before Father moved us to Chicago. I know work." She proved it too, efficiently preparing a meal from his meager supplies that tasted better than anything he'd made in months. As she worked, Eli found himself watching the sure way she moved, the determination in every gesture. This wasn't the helpless Eastern bride he'd expected. "Why did you answer Blackledge's advertisement?" he asked finally, curiosity overcoming his usual reserve. Maggie paused in kneading biscuit dough. "Father died last year. Bad investments. We lost everything. I tried finding work, but—" She shrugged. "A woman alone in Chicago has few respectable options. When I saw Mr. Blackledge's letter describing his ranch, promising security and respect, I thought it was salvation. Man like Blackledge knows how to paint a pretty picture." "Yes." Her hands resumed their work, perhaps pressing harder than necessary. "He was very convincing, sent money for travel, nice clothes, said he wanted a wife who could bring culture to the territory. I should have known when his letters never asked about me, only told me what he expected." The wind rattled the shutters, and they both looked up. The storm was intensifying, if anything. Eli mentally calculated his supplies. They could last a week if careful, maybe more. "Tell me about before," Maggie said suddenly. "You weren't always a rancher." Eli's expression closed off. "What makes you say that?" "The way you move, always checking the windows, the door. You sleep with one eye open and your hand near that rifle. You've got the habits of a hunted man, Mr. Mercer. Or a careful one." "Perhaps." She shaped the biscuits with steady hands. "We all have pasts we'd rather forget. I won't pry into yours if you don't judge mine." It was a fair bargain. As the day wore on, they found an easier companionship. Maggie had a quick wit when fear wasn't riding her, and she drew out stories from Eli about ranch life, his cattle, the changing seasons in the valley, safe topics that skirted around the edges of who they really were. By evening, the cabin felt almost cozy. They'd pushed the furniture back to make more living space, and Maggie had organized his scattered belongings with an efficiency that both amused and alarmed him. No one had touched his things in 5 years. "You're making yourself at home," he observed, not unkindly. She flushed. "I'm sorry. I can't stand idleness. Mother always said nervous hands were the devil's playground." No harm in it. He actually liked the changes. The cabin felt less like a cave and more like a home. Dangerous thinking that, after supper, they sat by the fire, the storm a constant presence outside. Maggie had found his small collection of books, mostly almanacs, and one battered copy of Shakespeare, and was reading by candlelight. The domesticity of the scene made something twist in Eli's chest. "May I ask you something?" Maggie set down the book. "Why do you live out here alone? You're not old. She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "I'm what?" "Nothing. Forgive me." But Eli had caught what she hadn't said. He wasn't old, wasn't harsh to look at. Why choose isolation? The answer stuck in his throat because the last woman he'd cared for had died because of what he was, who he was, because his reputation with a gun had made her a target. "Sometimes alone is safer," he said finally, "for everyone." Maggie studied him with those sage eyes that seemed to see too much. "That's a lonely kind of safety." "Better than the alternative." She didn't argue, but her expression was sad. They prepared for sleep in the same arrangement as before, but something had shifted. The awareness between them was sharper now, electric like the storm outside. In the night, Eli woke to find Maggie shaking beneath her blankets, not from cold but from dreams. Soft whimpers escaped her lips, and her hands clutched at the covers like claws. Without thinking, he moved to the bedside. "Easy," he murmured, the same tone he used with spooked horses. "You're safe. Just dreams." Her eyes flew open, wild with terror before focusing on his face. "He was here, Blackledge. He found us." "Just a dream. Storm's got you rattled." She sat up, pushing damp hair from her forehead. "It wasn't just a dream. You don't know him, what he's capable of, the stories the other women told." She shuddered. Eli fetched water, waiting while she composed herself. In the firelight, she looked younger, more vulnerable, but when she spoke again, steel threaded her voice. "I won't go back. Whatever happens, I won't be his property." "No one's saying you should." "Then what when this storm breaks? Where do I go? I have nothing. No one, even if I could get back east. What then, a woman who ran from her wedding bed? I'd be ruined." The unfairness of it burned in Eli's gut. She'd done nothing but refuse to be some man's possession, and society would punish her for it. He made a decision that surprised himself. "There's a stage station about 40 miles south. You could catch a coach to Denver, maybe further. I've got some money saved." "I couldn't." "Not charity. Call it a loan if that sits better." He moved back to his place by the fire. "Point is, you've got options besides freezing or going back to Blackledge." Maggie was quiet for a long moment. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Eli stared into the flames, seeing another face there, another woman who'd needed help, maybe because someone should. The third day brought no relief from the storm. If anything, it worsened. They could barely see 3 feet from the windows, and the wind howled like all the demons of hell were loose. But inside, a different kind of tension built. Little things, the brush of hands when passing dishes, the way Maggie's borrowed shirt gaped when she bent to tend the fire, revealing the elegant line of her throat, the way Eli's eyes followed her movements despite himself. She caught him looking once and didn't look away. Something passed between them, hot and dangerous as lightning. Then she deliberately turned back to her sewing. She'd found his mending pile and attacked it with determination, leaving Eli to wrestle with feelings he'd thought long buried. That night, the cold deepened until even the roaring fire couldn't keep it fully at bay. Eli woke to chattering teeth, not his own. Maggie was curled in a tight ball on the bed, every blanket wrapped around her but still shivering. "The hell with propriety," he muttered, grabbing the buffalo hide from the wall. He spread it over her, then, after a moment's hesitation, lay down atop the covers beside her, adding his body heat to the pile. "Just for warmth," he said to the darkness. "Just for warmth," she agreed through chattering teeth. But when her shivering finally stopped, neither moved away. They lay there, separated by layers of blankets but aware of every breath, every shift. The storm raged outside, but inside was a different kind of electricity. "Eli," her voice was soft in the darkness. "Yeah, thank you for everything. Whatever happens when this ends, thank you." He didn't trust himself to answer. Instead, he lay still as she gradually relaxed into sleep, her breathing evening out. Only then did he allow himself to acknowledge the truth: he was in trouble. This woman, with her courage and determination, her quick wit and sad eyes, had breached more than just his cabin. She'd reminded him what it felt like to care, and that was more dangerous than any storm. The fourth night brought a brief lull in the storm. Snow still fell, but the violent wind had quieted to a whisper. Inside the cabin, the silence felt heavier than the howling had been. Eli sat cleaning his rifle while Maggie mended yet another shirt, her needle flashing in the lamplight. They'd fallen into an easy routine over the past days, moving around each other with the practiced grace of longtime partners. It was dangerous. How natural it felt. How right. "Storm's breaking," Eli said unnecessarily. "Yes," Maggie's hand stilled on the fabric. "Tomorrow, perhaps the day after, travel will be possible again." Neither spoke what that meant. She would leave. He would return to his solitude. This strange interlude would end, and they would become strangers again. The thought sat like lead in Eli's stomach. "I should check the horses," he said, standing abruptly. "Make sure the lean-to held." In the dark. "Moon's out. Won't be long." He needed air, space, distance from the woman who'd turned his ordered world inside out. But as he reached for his coat, Maggie stood too. "I'll come with you. I've been cooped up for days." He should refuse, should maintain the boundaries that were already too blurred. Instead, he found himself nodding. The world outside was transformed. Snow lay thick and pristine, glowing blue-white under a 3/4 moon. The air was sharp enough to cut, but clean. Stars wheeled overhead in a clarity only winter could bring. "Oh," Maggie breathed, her face turned skyward. "I'd forgotten how many stars there are out here." She looked ethereal in the moonlight, like something from a fairy story his mother used to tell. Snow caught in her dark hair, and her breath clouded silver in the cold air. Eli forced himself to look away, focusing on the practical matter of checking the horses. The animals were fine, sheltered and content with the hay he'd stocked. As he worked, he was aware of Maggie exploring the small clearing, her wonder at the transformed landscape evident in every movement. "It's beautiful," she said, joining him by the fence. "Deadly, but beautiful." "Most things out here are both." She glanced at him, something knowing in her expression. "Yes, I'm beginning to understand that." They should go back inside. The cold was already biting through their coats, but neither moved. The moon painted everything in silver and shadow, creating a world that seemed apart from reality. "When I leave," Maggie said quietly, "what will you tell people if Blackledge comes asking?" "Nothing. Haven't seen anyone. Don't know anything." "He won't believe that." "Doesn't matter what he believes. Matters what he can prove." She turned to face him fully. "You'd lie for me, risk his anger." "Wouldn't be lying. Far as I'm concerned, you were never here." Her hand touched his arm, light as snow. "You're a good man. Eli Mercer. Whatever you were before, you're a good man now." Something in her tone, in the way she looked at him, broke through his careful control. "You don't know what I've done, the lives I've taken." "I know what you've given. A chance, safety, kindness, when you could have turned me away." Her hand tightened on his arm. "That's what matters." They stood close now, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, the way her lips parted slightly in the cold. The air between them crackled with possibility. "Maggie," he said, her name a warning. "I know," she whispered. "I know all the reasons why not, but Eli, we might only have tonight." She rose up on her toes, and he met her halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that was part desperation, part promise. She tasted of coffee and courage, and when she pressed closer, he forgot all the reasons this was dangerous. His hands tangled in her hair, and hers gripped his coat like she was drowning. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and necessary. When they finally broke apart, Both were breathing hard. Inside, Eli said roughly, "You'll freeze." They stumbled back to the cabin, the space between them electric with want. But once inside, with the door barred against the world, reality reasserted itself. They stood awkwardly by the fire, the weight of what had happened settling over them. "I should," Maggie began. "We don't have to," Eli said simultaneously. They stopped, almost laughing at the absurdity. Two adults, dancing around desire like youngsters at their first social. "I'm not asking for promises," Maggie said finally. "I know you can't give them, but Eli, I've spent my whole life being told what's proper, what's expected. For once, I want to choose for myself." He studied her face, seeing determination mixed with vulnerability. "And you choose this even knowing?" "Especially knowing," she interrupted. "Tomorrow I'll leave, become someone new somewhere else, but tonight..." She moved closer, her hand finding his. "Tonight I choose you." The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows. Outside, the storm's last gasps rattled the windows, and in that moment, Eli made his own choice. He pulled her to him, kissing her with all the loneliness of 5 solitary years, all the desire he'd tried to deny. She responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt. When he swept her up and carried her to the bed, she laughed a sound of pure joy that pierced his heart. They came together with desperate tenderness, two souls finding harbor in the storm. Later, they lay entwined beneath the buffalo robe, skin cooling in the fire's dying light. Maggie traced the scars on his chest with gentle fingers. "Will you tell me," she asked softly, "who you were?" In the darkness, with her warmth against him, Eli found the words. He told her about the young man who'd thought his quick draw made him special, about the reputation that grew until he couldn't walk into a town without someone calling him out, about Sarah, the schoolteacher who'd loved him despite it all. "She died because of me," he said, the words bitter even after 5 years. "Not by my hand, but because of what I was. Some kid trying to make a name came for me. Sarah got between us." Maggie's arms tightened around him. "That wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? I chose that life. She paid for it." They were quiet for a moment. Then Maggie spoke, her voice fierce. "You chose to change, to become better. That matters." "Does it? I'm still just a killer hiding in the hills?" "No." She sat up, forcing him to meet her eyes even in the dimness. "You're a man who saved a stranger's life, who gave shelter without asking for anything. Who," her voice caught, "who made me remember I'm more than property to be traded?" She kissed him then, soft and sweet. "Whatever name you carried before, whoever that man was, he's not who I see." They made love again, slower this time, memorizing each touch. And afterward, as sleep pulled at them, Maggie whispered against his chest, "You'll drive me crazy if I stay much longer." Eli smiled softly, his voice a warm murmur. "Then let your heart lead the way. These hands may be imperfect, but from this moment on, they are only yours." She shivered at his touch, at his words. "Sweeter than sin," she breathed. "That's what you are, my beautiful contradiction." They held each other as the fire died to embers, as the storm finally exhausted itself outside. Both knew morning would bring hard choices. The world would intrude with all its harsh realities. But for now, in this stolen moment between storms, they had each other. Two damaged souls who'd found unexpected grace in a cabin at the edge of nowhere. When dawn came, it would find them still entwined, reluctant to let go of what they'd discovered in the dark. The sun rose on a changed world, both outside the cabin where snow lay in pristine drifts, and inside where two people had chosen each other against all wisdom. What that choice would cost them remained to be seen, but for now, it was enough. The morning after the storm broke dawned crystal clear and bitter cold. Eli woke to find Maggie already dressed, standing by the window watching the sun paint the snow-covered valley in shades of gold and pink. Something in her posture made his chest tighten. "You're leaving today," he said. It wasn't a question. She turned, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The roads will be passable by noon. The longer I stay, the more danger I bring to your door." He wanted to argue, to tell her to stay, but the words stuck in his throat. She was right. Every hour increased the chance of Blackledge finding her here. They moved through breakfast in careful silence, both avoiding what had passed between them in the night. It was easier to focus on practical matters, packing food for her journey, finding suitable clothes, counting out money for the stage. "I'll saddle the mare," Eli said. "She's steady, won't spook easy." "Eli, I can't take your horse." "You can and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "Stage station's too far to walk, especially in this snow." He was checking the saddle cinch when the dog started barking. Not his dogs. He didn't keep any. The sound came from the valley trail, along with the jingle of harness and the crunch of snow under many hooves. Eli's hand went to his gun. "Get inside, now!" But it was too late. Around the bend came a party of 8 riders, Owen Blackledge at their head, even at a distance. Eli could see the satisfied smirk on the man's broad face. Blackledge was everything Eli despised, soft from easy living but hard in the ways that mattered, with pale eyes that viewed everything as either possession or obstacle. He rode a black stallion worth more than most men made in a year, his coat trimmed with fur, his boots polished despite the snow. Well, Blackledge called out as they approached. "Eli Mercer, heard you might have found something that belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you," Eli said evenly. "Now, that's where you're wrong." Blackledge dismounted, his men spreading out in a semicircle. Eli recognized several hired guns from Cheyenne and Laramie, the kind who'd do anything for the right price. "See, I paid good money to bring a bride out from Chicago, signed papers and everything. Then she up and disappears on our wedding day. Man's got a right to collect his property." "I am not property." Maggie emerged from the cabin, head high despite the fear Eli could see in her eyes. She'd changed back into her wedding dress, a deliberate choice, he realized. Standing there in ivory silk against the rough logs, she looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd refused to be bought. "Ah, Margaret." Blackledge's smile was all teeth. "You've led us quite a chase. Time to come home, darling." "I have no home with you." She pulled out a folded paper from her bodice. "This is the contract you had me sign in Chicago. Your own words, the marriage was contingent on mutual consent at the time of ceremony. I did not consent. The contract is void." "Fancy Eastern education," Blackledge sneered. "You think that matters out here, Sheriff Hale? Arrest this woman for theft. She stole my horse and violated our agreement." From among the riders, a man with a tarnished badge nudged his horse forward. Tom Hale was more Blackledge's creature than lawman, bought and paid for years ago, but even he looked uncomfortable. "Now, Mr. Blackledge, if the lady says she didn't consent—" "I said arrest her." Blackledge's voice cracked like a whip. "And Mercer here for harboring a thief." The sheriff shifted in his saddle, clearly reluctant but not brave enough to defy his patron. "Miss, I'm going to need you to come with us." "No." Eli stepped forward, positioning himself between Maggie and the men. His hand rested easy on his gun butt, but everyone there knew what that casual stance meant. They'd all heard stories about Eli Mercer, even if most thought him long dead or gone. "The lady says no," Eli said quietly. "I reckon that ends it." "You fixing to draw on 8 men?" Blackledge laughed, but there was uncertainty in it now. "Your reputation might be fierce, Mercer, but you ain't that fast." "Don't need to be fast. Just need to be first." Eli's eyes found Blackledge, and my first bullet knows right where it's going. The tension stretched taut. Several of the hired guns shifted nervously. They were paid to intimidate. maybe rough someone up. Going against someone like Eli Mercer in a straight fight was another matter entirely. Sheriff Hale cleared his throat. Now, let's all calm down. No need for bloodshed. Mr. Blackledge, if Miss Doyle has that paper saying she don't consent, and she's willing to return the horse. I don't give a damn about the horse. Blackledge's composure cracked. She made a fool of me, left me standing at my own wedding. You know what people are saying? That you're a man who thinks he can buy a wife like cattle. Maggie stepped out from behind Eli, fire in her eyes now. That you treat women like possessions to use and discard. Yes, I imagine they're saying all of that, because it's true. Blackledge's face went purple. You little... Choose your next words careful-like, Eli warned. The lady's under my protection. Your protection, Blackledge laughed uglily. We all know what kind of protection a woman gets in a man's cabin for a week. Damaged goods now. Aren't you? Margaret, no decent man will have you. Then it's fortunate I'm not looking for a decent man's approval. Maggie shot back. I'd rather be ruined in the eyes of society than be your property for even one day. Several of the riders exchanged glances. This wasn't going how they'd expected. The woman was supposed to cower, to beg. Instead, she stood defiant in her wedding dress, looking like an avenging angel. Sheriff, one of the hired guns muttered. Maybe we should... Quiet, Blackledge snarled. He turned back to Eli. You think you've won something here? You think you can just take what's mine? Nobody's taken anything, Eli said. The lady made her choice. Now you can respect it and ride on, or we can settle this another way. Your call. Blackledge's hand twitched toward his gun, then stilled. He wasn't a gunfighter, and he knew it. His power came from money and influence, not speed with iron. This isn't over, he said finally. You've made an enemy today. Mercer, both of you, I own this county. You won't be able to buy supplies, sell your cattle, nothing. I'll make your lives hell until you beg me to take her back. We'll take our chances, Eli said. For a moment, it looked like Blackledge might push it anyway. Then Sheriff Hale spoke up. Mr. Blackledge, the sun's getting high. Long ride back to your ranch. It was a graceful exit, and Blackledge took it, though his eyes promised retribution. Remember what I said, Margaret, when you're starving in some brothel. Remember you could have had everything. I'll remember I had my freedom, she replied steadily. That's worth more than anything you could offer. The riders turned and left. Blackledge's back rigid with fury. Eli didn't relax until they were out of sight, and even then he kept watching the trail. They'll be back, Maggie said quietly. Yes, he'll make good on his threats. You know that. I know. Eli turned to her, seeing the mix of fear and determination in her face. Question is, what do you want to do about it? She looked at him for a long moment, then back at the cabin that had been her sanctuary. I should leave. Take your horse, catch that stage, disappear. It's the smart thing. Is that what you want? What I want, she laughed, but there were tears in it. What I want is impossible. I want to stay here with you, but that would only bring you more trouble. I want to face Blackledge down, but he holds all the cards. I want... She stopped, shaking her head. Eli moved closer, catching her hands in his. They were cold, trembling slightly. Tell me what you want. I want to not run anymore, she whispered. I want to stand and fight for something. With someone. Her eyes met his. With you, if you'll have me. The words hung in the cold air between them. Eli knew what saying yes meant, not just facing Blackledge's wrath, but opening himself to caring again, to the possibility of loss. It won't be easy, he warned. He'll come at us every way he can. Economic pressure, social isolation, maybe worse. And people will talk. The woman who ran from her wedding, living with the hermit gunslinger. Let them talk. Steel entered her voice. I've been proper my whole life. Look where it got me. If I'm going to be ruined, at least let it be on my own terms." Eli pulled her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. "Then we stand together, come what may." She tilted her face up to his. "Partners." "Partners," he agreed, and sealed it with a kiss. When they broke apart, the sun was fully up, painting the snow in brilliant white. It felt like a new beginning, even with the storm clouds gathering on the horizon in the form of Owen Blackledge's rage. "First things first," Eli said, practical now that the decision was made. "We need supplies before Blackledge can cut us off, and I need to talk to some people, call in old favors. He's not the only one with friends in this territory." "And I," Maggie said with a determined smile, "need to learn to shoot. If we're making a stand, I want to be more than a liability." Eli grinned, the expression transforming his usually stern features. "I reckon I can teach you a thing or two." As they headed inside to plan their next moves, neither looked back at the trail where Blackledge had disappeared. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The isolated cabin had become a fortress for two, and that, Eli thought, made all the difference. The following weeks tested their resolve in ways neither had anticipated. True to his word, Blackledge moved swiftly to isolate them. The general store in Sweetwater suddenly couldn't fill Eli's orders. The bank discovered irregularities in his account that needed investigating. Cowboys who'd bought cattle from him for years now avoided his eyes on the street. But Eli had expected this. What surprised him was Maggie's response to adversity. "If they won't sell to us," she said one morning, studying their dwindling supplies, "we'll have to be creative." She proved remarkably resourceful. Within days, she'd established trading relationships with the Mexican families who worked the mines people Blackledge's influence didn't reach because he'd never bothered to notice them. She bartered Eli's horses for supplies, her mended clothes for preserved foods, her teaching skills for goods. "You're full of surprises," Eli said, watching her haggle with Maria Gonzalez over a sack of cornmeal. "A lady's education includes French, piano, and managing household accounts," Maggie replied with a wry smile. "Turns out the last one is actually useful." In the evenings, Eli kept his promise to teach her to shoot. They started with his old Navy Colt, too heavy for her hands but good for learning the basics. "Don't jerk the trigger," he instructed, standing behind her, steadying her arms. "Squeeze gentle-like, same way you'd coax a horse." The first shots went wild, but Maggie was nothing if not determined. Day after day she practiced, until her groups tightened and her draw smoothed out. When Eli presented her with a lighter Winchester rifle, her eyes lit up like a child's at Christmas. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her hands over the polished stock. "It's practical," Eli corrected, but he was pleased by her reaction. "Rifle's better than a pistol for defense. More range, more stopping power." She took to the Winchester like she was born to it. Within a week, she could hit a tin can at 50 yards. Within 2, she was picking off targets Eli could barely see. "Natural eye," he said approvingly after she'd put 6 shots through a playing card tacked to a fence post. "Good teacher," she countered, and the look she gave him made his collar feel too tight. They were growing closer in ways that went beyond the physical. In the long winter evenings, they talked, really talked. Maggie told him about growing up in Chicago, about the father who'd loved her but couldn't manage money, about the mother who'd died believing a good marriage was a woman's only security. "She wasn't wrong," Maggie said sadly. "Look how few choices I had when father's debts came due." "You made a choice," Eli reminded her. "Took courage to run from Blackledge, or foolishness. Same thing sometimes." Eli found himself sharing too. Stories he'd never told anyone, about growing up on a hardscrabble farm in Missouri, about the war between the states that had taught him he was good at killing, about the drift westward afterward, the reputation that had grown until it consumed everything good in his life. "Do you miss it?" Maggie asked one night. "The excitement, the importance of being feared. Eli considered. It's the simplicity sometimes. When you're a gunfighter, you always know where you stand. It's kill or be killed. This, he gestured at their domestic scene. This is harder, more complicated. More worthwhile? He looked at her, curled in the chair he'd come to think of as hers, firelight playing across her features. Yeah, more worthwhile. The pressure from Blackledge intensified as winter deepened. Fences were cut, letting Eli's cattle scatter. Salt licks were poisoned. One morning they woke to find a dead coyote hung on their gate, a clear warning. He's escalating, Eli said grimly, cutting the animal down. He's getting desperate, Maggie corrected. He expected us to fold by now. She was right. Blackledge had underestimated them, both Eli's connections and stubborn pride, Maggie's resourcefulness and growing steel spine. But desperate men did dangerous things. The attack came on a moonless night in late January. Eli woke to the smell of smoke and the crackle of flames. The hay barn was ablaze, fire already licking at the roof beams. Stay inside, he ordered Maggie, grabbing his Winchester and heading for the door. Like hell, she shot back, loading her own rifle. They worked side by side, Eli covering while Maggie led the panicked horses from the adjoining stable. The barn was lost. Whoever said it had done a thorough job, but they saved the animals and kept the fire from spreading to the cabin. As dawn broke over the smoking ruins, they found tracks. 5 riders, maybe 6. No effort to hide their trail. Blackledge is done playing games, Eli said. Good. Maggie's face was streaked with soot, her nightgown ruined, but her eyes blazed with fury. I'm tired of being on the defensive. That afternoon, unexpected help arrived. Thomas Chen, who ran the laundry in Sweetwater, appeared with his wagon loaded with lumber. Heard you had trouble, he said simply. Brought what I could spare. Throughout the day, others came, the Mexican families Maggie had befriended. A few small ranchers who'd also felt Blackledge's pressure over the years. Even Sarah Walsh, the minister's wife who'd publicly snubbed Maggie in town, arrived with a basket of food and a contrite expression. What you did took courage, she told Maggie quietly. Standing up to him, maybe it's time more of us found some backbone. As the community worked together to clear the rubble and begin rebuilding, Eli felt something shift. This wasn't just about him and Maggie anymore. It had become about standing up to a bully who'd held the county in his grip too long. You did this, he told Maggie that evening as they watched their neighbors head home. We did this, she corrected. They just needed to see someone stand up first. Sheriff Hale arrived the next morning, looking uncomfortable. Need to ask about the fire, he said, not meeting their eyes. Ask away, Eli said coolly. Blackledge says you probably set it yourself for insurance money. Maggie laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Insurance. We can barely afford cornmeal, Sheriff, but please, investigate thoroughly. Check those tracks leading straight back toward the Blackledge Ranch. Hale shifted his weight. Now, Miss Doyle. Mrs. Mercer, Maggie corrected firmly. It wasn't true they hadn't found a preacher willing to defy Blackledge yet, but the claim hung in the air like a challenge. The sheriff's eyes widened. You got married? That's our business, Eli said. You done here? Hale left without pressing the issue, but Eli knew word would spread. By claiming to be married, they'd crossed another line in society's eyes. That was risky, he told Maggie after Hale rode off. Everything we do is risky. She touched his arm. But I'm tired of him thinking he has any claim on me. If calling myself your wife stops that, then that's what I'll do. Maggie. Eli caught her hand. You know I'd make it real if I could, but no preacher in 3 counties will perform the ceremony, not with Blackledge's influence. I know. She squeezed his fingers. But maybe the ceremony doesn't matter as much as the choice. I choose you, Eli Mercer, Every day, I choose you. He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of smoke and determination that clung to her. And I choose you, Maggie Doyle, come what may. That night, as they lay together listening to the wind, Maggie traced patterns on his chest. Do you think we're winning? We're surviving, Eli said. Sometimes that's the same thing. The fire will set him back, make him look weak. Others might start standing up to him too. Maybe, or he might get more dangerous. Maggie was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking, what if we took the fight to him instead of always reacting? What if we acted? Eli turned to look at her. What did you have in mind? The smile that curved her lips was sharp as a blade. Owen Blackledge built his empire on intimidation and shady deals. What if someone started looking into exactly how he acquired all that land? I've been talking to Maria Gonzalez. Her father owned a ranch that Blackledge foreclosed on 10 years ago. The paperwork was questionable. You want to investigate Blackledge? I want to destroy him, Maggie said simply. The same way he tried to destroy us. But legally, properly, turn his own weapons against him. Eli studied her face in the darkness. This woman who'd arrived at his door a frightened runaway and had transformed into a warrior. That's dangerous thinking, he said. Everything worth doing is dangerous. She pressed closer. But we're good at dangerous, aren't we? Yeah, Eli agreed, already thinking through the implications. I reckon we are. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent, but inside the cabin, plans were being laid that would shake the very foundations of Blackledge's empire. The hunted were about to become hunters, and God help anyone who stood in their way. Spring arrived slowly in Wyoming territory, the snow retreating to reveal the damage of a hard winter. But with the thaw came unexpected changes. The small rebellion that had started with rebuilding Eli's barn had grown into something larger. Maggie stood before a gathering in the Gonzalez family's adobe house, a stack of papers before her. The room was packed Mexican miners, small ranchers, shopkeepers who'd grown tired of Blackledge's stranglehold on the county. According to the territorial records I've obtained, she said, her teacher's voice carrying clearly, at least 12 properties were foreclosed on by the Sweetwater Bank between 1866 and 1874. In every case, Owen Blackledge purchased the land within days for a fraction of its value. That's business, muttered Jim Harrison, a rancher who'd lost his spread 3 years back. Is it? Maggie held up a document. The bank president during that period was Clarence Blackledge Owen's cousin, the judge who approved every foreclosure, Judge William Blackledge, Owen's uncle. A murmur ran through the room. Everyone had suspected corruption, but seeing the evidence laid out so starkly was different. What can we do about it now? Asked Maria Gonzalez. It was years ago. Territory law allows for review of land transfers if fraud can be proven, Maggie explained. We need a lawyer willing to take the case, and a judge who isn't in Blackledge's pocket. Good luck finding either. Someone called out. Eli, who'd been standing guard by the door, spoke up. Circuit judge comes through next month. Judge Samuel Morrison from Denver. He's got no ties to Blackledge. And I've written to a lawyer in Cheyenne, Maggie added. James Thornton. He's young, ambitious, and looking to make a name for himself. The meeting went on for hours, people sharing stories of Blackledge's intimidation and shady dealings. By the time it ended, they had 20 families willing to join a lawsuit. As Eli and Maggie rode home through the greening valley, he glanced at her with admiration. You're building an army. Someone has to. She sat the horse with easy confidence now, the Winchester across her saddle. Blackledge has had his way too long because people were scared and isolated. Together, we're stronger. He won't take this lying down. I'm counting on it. Her smile was fierce. Let him show his true colors in public. Every threat, every act of violence just proves our case. They were approaching their cabin when Eli pulled up sharp. Fresh horse tracks crossed their path, many horses, moving fast. "Trouble," he said quietly. They approached cautiously, rifles ready, but instead of ambushers, they found neighbors, the Chens, the Walshes, several of the Mexican families working frantically to beat out the last flames of another fire. This time, it had been the chicken coop. "Saw the smoke from town," Thomas Chen explained, his usually neat clothes covered in soot. "Came as fast as we could." "Anyone hurt?" Maggie asked, dismounting quickly. "Chickens are scattered but alive," Sarah Walsh reported. "We stopped it before it spread." As they worked together to clean up the damage, Eli noticed something had changed. 6 months ago, these people would have turned away, not wanting to risk Blackledge's anger. Now they stood together, united by shared purpose. That evening, Maggie established a new routine that would define the coming weeks. She set up a school in their rebuilt barn, teaching reading and writing to the Mexican children whose education had been neglected. But the lessons went beyond letters and numbers. "If you can read," she told young Miguel Gonzalez, "you can read contracts, laws, you can protect yourself with knowledge." Word spread. Soon, adults were joining the lessons, learning to write their names, to read the documents that had been used against them. Maggie taught with passion and patience, and Eli watched her transform from socialite to revolutionary. The transformation went both ways. Under Eli's tutelage, Maggie had become formidable with her rifle. She could ride as well as any ranch hand, her soft hands now calloused from work. But more than that, she'd found her voice clear, strong, unafraid. "You know what you've become?" Eli asked one evening as she cleaned her Winchester with practiced ease. "What's that?" "The woman Blackledge was afraid you'd be strong, independent, dangerous." She looked up at him, green eyes bright. "Good, let him fear me for a change." The lawyer, James Thornton, arrived on a dusty afternoon in early May. He was younger than they'd expected, maybe 28, with earnest brown eyes and an ambitious set to his jaw. "Mrs. Mercer," he said, shaking Maggie's hand, "your letters were quite compelling. I've reviewed the preliminary documents you sent. If even half of what you claim is true, this could be the biggest fraud case in territorial history." "It's true," Maggie assured him. "Every word." They spent days going over evidence, interviewing families, building their case. Thornton was thorough, intelligent, and surprisingly fearless. "Aren't you worried about going up against Blackledge?" Eli asked him privately. "My father lost his farm to a man like Blackledge back in Ohio." Thornton replied, "I became a lawyer to fight men like that. This case could establish precedent for the whole territory." As the date for the circuit judge's arrival approached, tension in the valley ratcheted higher. Blackledge's men were seen riding the roads at all hours. Veiled threats were made, the morning they were to file the lawsuit. Maggie found a note nailed to their door. "Last chance to leave alive." "Subtle," she said dryly, handing it to Eli. "We should take precautions. Maybe you should stay here while Thornton and I—" "Eli Mercer," she interrupted. "If you think I'm hiding while you fight my battle, you don't know me at all." He had to smile at her fierceness. "No, I reckon I do know you. That's what worries me." They rode into Sweetwater as a group, Eli and Maggie, Thornton, and a dozen of the families bringing suit. It was a show of force, letting Blackledge know they wouldn't be intimidated. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread, and people had come from miles around to witness this challenge to Blackledge's power. Owen himself sat in the front row, flanked by hired guns, his pale eyes promising retribution. Judge Morrison was an older man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He listened as Thornton laid out the case, the pattern of foreclosures, the family connections, the immediate purchase of lands at below-market prices. "This is a serious accusation," the judge said when Thornton finished. "Mr. Blackledge, how do you respond?" Blackledge's lawyer, imported from Denver, stood smoothly, These are baseless claims born of jealousy and failure. My client built his holdings through legitimate business. Then he won't mind if I review all bank records from the period in question. Judge Morrison interrupted. Sheriff Hale, you will secure those records immediately. Now, Your Honor, the sheriff began nervously. Immediately. Sheriff, unless you'd like me to telegraph the territorial marshal to do it instead. As Hale reluctantly left to comply, Blackledge's composure cracked. He stood abruptly. This is a farce, a kangaroo court led by a fallen woman and a killer. Sit down, Mr. Blackledge. The judge ordered coolly, and you'll address this court with respect, or I'll have you removed. You can't, Blackledge began. I can, and I will. Morrison's gavel cracked like a gunshot. This court will reconvene tomorrow to review evidence. Until then, I'm placing an injunction on any transfer of properties named in this suit. As people filed out, Blackledge caught Eli's arm. You've made a fatal mistake, he hissed. Both of you. Only mistake I made was not doing this sooner. Eli replied evenly. Outside, their supporters gathered around, voices raised in excitement. For the first time, someone had stood up to Blackledge in court and won, at least the first round. This is just the beginning, Thornton warned. He'll fight dirty now. Let him, Maggie said, her arm linked through Eli's. We've got the law, the truth, and each other. That's more than he's got. That night, they celebrated quietly at the cabin, but both Eli and Maggie knew the real fight was just beginning. Blackledge had been embarrassed publicly. His empire threatened. He would strike back, and when he did, it would be vicious. Are you ready for what's coming? Eli asked as they prepared for bed. I've been ready since the day I knocked on your door, Maggie replied. The question is he ready for us? Looking at her, this woman who'd transformed from runaway bride to warrior for justice, Eli thought Blackledge had no idea what he was truly up against. The teacher had become a revolutionary, and she was just getting started. The telegram arrived at dawn, carried by a rider who didn't wait for a reply. Eli read it aloud in the dim morning light. Judge Morrison taken ill. Case postponed indefinitely. Sorry, Thornton. Taken ill, Maggie repeated flatly. How convenient for Blackledge. Could be coincidence. And I could be Queen Victoria. She paced the cabin, her anger palpable. He got to the judge, threatened him, bribed him. Something. Eli set the telegram aside. Doesn't matter how. What matters is what we do now. We can't wait for another circuit judge. That could be months. Maggie stopped pacing, her expression hardening. No, if the law won't come to us, we'll take our case to the people. That afternoon found them in Sweetwater's Main Street, where Maggie had organized something unprecedented, a public rally. Despite the risks, dozens had gathered. She stood on a wagon bed, her voice carrying clear and strong. Owen Blackledge wants us to give up, she declared. He thinks if he delays long enough, we'll scatter like sheep. But we're not sheep. We're citizens of this territory, and we demand justice. The crowd murmured agreement, but Eli saw the fear in many faces. Blackledge's men lined the street, watching with hard eyes. They'll remember who's here, Jim Harrison muttered. Good, Maggie shot back. Let them remember. Let them see we're not afraid anymore. She was magnificent. Eli thought a warrior goddess in calico, her Winchester propped beside her as she spoke. But he also saw what she couldn't the way Blackledge's men shifted positions, surrounding the crowd. The attack came 3 nights later. Eli woke to the thunder of hooves, many riders, coming fast. He rolled from bed, grabbing his gun belt. How many? Maggie was already at the window with her rifle. 8, maybe 10. Eli checked his Colt, then reached for the Winchester. They're not trying to hide. Want us to know they're coming. They took positions, Maggie at the front window, Eli at the side. The riders pulled up just outside rifle range, their torches casting dancing shadows. "Mercer," Blackledge's voice carried across the darkness. "Send out the woman, and you can live. This is between her and me now." "Like hell," Maggie muttered, sighting down her rifle. "Easy," Eli cautioned. "Let them make the first move." "The great Eli Mercer," Blackledge continued mockingly. "Hiding behind a woman's skirts. Your reputation must be as false as her virtue." Eli felt Maggie tense beside him. "Don't let him bait you," he said quietly. "Last chance. Mercer, send her out, or we burn you out." "Counteroffer," Eli called back. "You turn around now, and I don't put a bullet between your eyes." "You're outnumbered 4-1. I've had worse odds." There was movement among the riders. Then one spurred forward, torch held high, aiming for the hay pile near the barn. Maggie's Winchester cracked. The torch flew from the rider's hand as he yanked his horse around, cursing and clutching his shoulder. "That was a warning," she shouted. "Next one goes through your heart." "The woman's got fangs," someone muttered. Another rider started forward. This time, Eli fired, his bullet kicking up dust inches from the horse's hooves. The animal reared, nearly throwing its rider. "Nobody has to die tonight," Eli said calmly. "But push us, and that changes real quick." For long moments, nobody moved. Then Blackledge spoke again, his cultured voice ugly with rage. "You think you've won something I own this county? No one will sell to you, buy from you, or help you. You'll starve out here." "We've done fine so far," Maggie called back. "Have you? How's that school of yours going to run when I make sure every family that sends their children loses their jobs? How long before your Mexican friends choose feeding their families over your crusade?" The cruelty of it threatening children's education. Families' livelihoods made Eli's finger itch on the trigger. But Maggie's response surprised him. She laughed, clear and genuine. The sound rang across the darkness like a bell. "Oh, Owen," she said, using his first name like a weapon. "You still don't understand. Every threat you make, every family you hurt, you create another enemy. You're not strengthening your position, you're weakening it." Brave words from a dead woman. "Then come kill me," Maggie challenged. "Right here, right now. Show everyone what you really are. Not a businessman, not a respectable rancher, just a coward who sends others to do his killing." Eli heard the sharp intake of breath from several riders. She'd struck a nerve. "You're nothing," Blackledge snarled. "A fortune hunter who spread her legs for the first man who'd have her." The crude words were meant to hurt, to shame. Instead, Maggie stepped into clear view at the window, rifle steady. "I'm Margaret Doyle Mercer," she said proudly. "Teacher, fighter, and the woman who's going to destroy you. Every land deal, every foreclosure, every bribe, I have it all documented. Even if you kill us tonight. Copies are already on their way to Denver, to the territorial governor, to newspapers back east. Your empire is built on sand. Owen, and I'm the tide coming in." It was a bluff they hadn't sent copies anywhere yet, but Blackledge couldn't know that. Eli saw uncertainty ripple through the riders. "Mr. Blackledge," one of them said nervously, "maybe we should—" "Shut up." But the damage was done. The moment for violence had passed, undermined by doubt and Maggie's fearless defiance. "This isn't over," Blackledge promised. "No," Eli agreed, speaking for the first time in minutes. "But tonight is take your men and go, while you still can." Slowly, reluctantly, the riders turned away. But as they departed, one hung back a younger man Eli recognized as Tom Garrett, a hand from the Broken Arrow Ranch. "Ma'am," Garrett called softly. "That true about the documents about sending copies?" "Every word," Maggie lied smoothly. Garrett nodded slowly, then spurred after the others. But Eli had seen something in his expression: doubt, maybe even admiration. "That was dangerous," Eli said when they were gone. "Calling his bluff like that. Everything we do is dangerous." Maggie set down her rifle with shaking hands, the only sign of the fear she'd hidden so well. "But did you see some of them were listening? Really listening?" She was right. The dynamic had shifted. This wasn't just about land anymore, it was about the kind of place the territory would become. And Maggie had positioned herself as the voice of that future. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Tom Garrett returned, this time alone and in daylight. "I want to help," he said simply. "What Blackledge is doing ain't right. Threatening kids, families. That's not the code." He wasn't the only one. Throughout the day, people arrived at the cabin. Some brought information documents they'd hidden, stories they'd been afraid to tell. Others brought supplies, defying Blackledge's economic embargo. "It's working," Thornton said, having returned from Denver with the news. "Word's spreading beyond the county. There's a reporter from the Cheyenne Daily Leader wanting to interview you, Mrs. Mercer, and the territorial governor's office is asking questions." But the victory came with a price. That evening, Maria Gonzalez arrived with her son Miguel, both bearing bruises. "They came to our home," she said quietly. "Said if Miguel attended your school again," she couldn't finish. Maggie knelt before the boy, gently examining his blackened eye. "I'm so sorry. Miguel, this is my fault." "No!" The 10-year-old's voice was fierce. "You taught me to read, Senora, to write my name. They can hurt me, but they can't take that away." His courage broke Maggie's heart and steeled her resolve simultaneously. "We end this," she told Eli that night. "No more waiting for judges or laws. We take the fight to Blackledge directly." "What did you have in mind?" Her smile was sharp as a blade. "Owen's pride is his weakness. He can't stand being seen as weak, as less than respectable. So we're going to show the whole territory exactly what he is." The plan she outlined was audacious, dangerous, and brilliant. It would require precise timing, steady nerves, and more than a little luck. "It could work," Eli admitted, "or get us both killed. Then we'd better make sure it works." 3 days later, everything was in place. The reporter from Cheyenne had arrived, along with several prominent citizens from neighboring counties. Maggie had arranged for a public meeting at the Sweetwater Town Hall, ostensibly to discuss the school, but really to present their evidence against Blackledge. The hall was packed. Blackledge himself sat in the back, surrounded by his men, confident in his power to intimidate. Maggie took the stage, every inch the educated lady despite her simple dress. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I want to talk to you about the future of our community." She began with the school, the children learning to read, the families finding hope. Then, skillfully, she wove in the larger story the pattern of corruption, the threats, the violence. "Some would have you believe this is about one woman's spite," she said, eyes finding Blackledge. "But it's about so much more. It's about whether we'll be a territory ruled by law or by fear." She produced document after document copies of the fraudulent foreclosures, sworn statements from victims, even a letter in Blackledge's own hand threatening a family who'd refused to sell. The crowd grew restless, angry. Blackledge's men shifted nervously. "This is slander," Blackledge roared, standing. "Lies spread by a harlot and a killer." "Then prove me wrong," Maggie challenged. "Open your books. Let the territorial authorities investigate. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear." It was the trap she'd laid, and he walked right into it. "I don't need to prove anything to you or anyone else. I built this county, I own it." "No one owns us," someone shouted from the crowd. Others took up the cry. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Blackledge's men moved toward the stage, but found their way blocked by townspeople. For the first time, the community stood against him openly. In the confusion, Eli spotted movement one of Blackledge's men drawing a hidden pistol, aiming for Maggie. Time slowed. Eli's hand moved with the speed that had made him legend. The Colt cleared leather and fired in one smooth motion, The would-be assassin's gun flew from his hand as he screamed and clutched his wrist. "Nobody else needs to bleed today," Eli announced, his gun covering the room. "But push it, and that changes." The hall fell silent. Then Sheriff Hale, who'd been watching from the side, stepped forward. "That's enough," he said heavily. "Mr. Blackledge, I think you and your men should leave. You work for me. Hale, I work for the law." The sheriff's spine straightened. "And I've been doing a poor job of it. That changes now." It was the turning point. Faced with united opposition, public exposure, and the loss of his tame lawmen, Blackledge had no choice but to retreat. As he reached the door, he turned back. "This isn't over." "Yes," Maggie said quietly. "It is." The crowd parted as Blackledge and his remaining men left. Then someone started clapping. Soon the hall rang with applause for Maggie, for Eli, for their own courage in standing up. "You did it," Thornton said, pumping Eli's hand. "You actually did it." "We all did it," Maggie corrected, but her eyes found Eli's across the room. They had won the battle, but both knew Blackledge wouldn't accept defeat easily. The war might not be over, but for tonight, victory was theirs. 5 years had passed since that tumultuous night at the town hall. The Wyoming Territory had changed, and so had the valley that Eli and Maggie called home, where once a lonely cabin stood. Now a proper ranch house sprawled, with a wide porch where Maggie taught her classes when weather permitted. Papa. A small tornado of energy burst from the house 4-year-old Sarah Mercer, named for the woman Eli had lost long ago, but embodying all the fierce spirit of her mother. Eli caught his daughter and swung her up, her delighted squeals echoing across the yard. "What's got you so excited, little one?" "Mama says we're going to town for the celebration." Indeed, Sweetwater was preparing for a special occasion, the 5th anniversary of what folks now called the Standing, the day the community had stood together against tyranny and won. Maggie emerged from the house, 2-year-old James on her hip. She looked radiant in the morning sun, her dark hair now showing premature silver at the temple's badges of honor from their struggles. "The whole town's talking about your speech," Eli said, setting Sarah down to run to her wooden horse. "Our speech," Maggie corrected, as she always did. "I may be the one talking, but we both know who keeps me standing." They'd been properly married 3 years now. Once a traveling preacher unafraid of Blackledge's fading influence had come through. But in truth, they'd been married since that night she'd whispered, "You'll drive me crazy," and he'd answered, "Then go mad." The ceremony had just made official what their hearts had long known. The ride into town showed how much had changed. Where Blackledge's ranch once dominated the landscape, now smaller farms dotted the valley. The fraudulent foreclosures had been reversed by territorial court. The land returned to its rightful owners. The Gonzalez family ranch flew both American and Mexican flags, a symbol of the inclusive community Maggie had helped build. Sweetwater itself bustled with activity. The new school a proper building now. Not just Maggie's barn classroom stood proudly on Main Street. Children of all backgrounds learned together, their voices carrying through open windows. In Mrs. Mercer. Miguel Gonzalez, now 15 and one of Maggie's assistant teachers, waved from the schoolhouse steps. "We're all set for your speech." The town square was decorated with bunting and flags. Tables groaned under the weight of food contributed by every family. It was more than a celebration, it was a declaration that they had not just survived, but thrived. As Maggie took the makeshift stage, Eli stood to the side with their children, his hand never far from the colt he still wore. Old habits died hard, even in peacetime. 5 years ago, Maggie began, her voice carrying the same strength it had that night in the town hall. "We made a choice. Not just to stand against one man's greed, but to stand for something better, for community, for justice, for the belief that in America, no one man should hold dominion over others." The crowd, easily 200 strong, now listened with rapt attention. These weren't just neighbors anymore. They were family forged in shared struggle. "We've built something here," she continued. "Not just homes and businesses, but hope. Every child who learns to read in our school, every family that works their own land, every person who walks free and unafraid, that's our victory." A figure at the edge of the crowd caught Eli's eye. He tensed, then relaxed. It was Owen Blackledge. But not the man he'd been. Prison had aged him 20 years in 5. He stood alone, his empire dissolved, his fortune redistributed by the courts to those he'd wronged. Blackledge held a package wrapped in brown paper. When he caught Eli watching, he approached slowly, hands visible. "Mercer," he said, his once commanding voice now quiet. "Mrs. Mercer." "Blackledge," Eli acknowledged warily. The former tyrant struggled with words. "I came to give this." He handed the package to Maggie. "For the school." Inside were books, dozens of them, expensive volumes from his personal library, and an envelope containing a bank draft for a substantial sum. "It doesn't forgive what I did," Blackledge said quietly. "Nothing can, but maybe it can help build something better." Maggie studied him for a long moment. "The children will benefit from these. Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness, some wounds ran too deep, but it was acknowledgement. Blackledge nodded and walked away. A broken man seeking redemption he might never find. "That was unexpected," Eli murmured. "People can change," Maggie replied softly. "We're proof of that." The celebration continued into the evening. Stories were shared of the dark days, but more importantly, dreams were voiced for the future. The railroad was coming, bringing new opportunities. The territory was moving towards statehood, and at the center of it all, the school that Maggie had started in a barn continued to grow, now with 3 full-time teachers and plans for expansion. As sunset painted the mountains gold and red, Eli found himself on the porch of what was now their townhouse. They kept it for school days, returning to the ranch on weekends. Maggie sat beside him, Sarah playing at their feet while James dozed in his mother's arms. "Any regrets?" he asked, as he did sometimes. "How could I regret this?" She gestured at their children, their community, their life. "If I hadn't knocked on your door that night." "This is what happened," Eli finished, echoing his words from years ago. "You, me, them. That's all that matters." Sheriff Tom Garrett he'd taken over when Hale retired stopped by to pay his respects. "Fine speech, Mrs. Mercer. You've got folks talking about running you for territorial legislature." Maggie laughed. "One crusade at a time. Sheriff." As night fell, lanterns were lit throughout the town. Music drifted from the saloon now run by the widow Walsh, who'd transformed it into a respectable establishment. Couples danced in the street, children chased fireflies, and the sense of community was palpable. "You know what I've been thinking," Maggie said as they prepared to head home. "What's that?" "We should write it down, all of it, so people remember not just what we fought against, but what we fought for." Eli considered this. "You want to tell the whole story, even the personal parts?" She smiled, that mischievous expression he'd fallen in love with. "Well, maybe we'll be selective with some details, but the heart of it that 2 broken people can heal each other, that a community can stand against tyranny, that love and courage can overcome fear and greed that's worth preserving." They loaded the sleeping children into the wagon, said their goodbyes, and headed for home under a canopy of stars. The ranch house welcomed them with yellow lamplight, the dogs barking joyful greeting. As they tucked the children into bed, Eli marveled at the life they'd built. The lonely cabin had become a home. The frightened runaway had become a community leader. The bitter gunfighter had become a father and protector, and the love that had sparked between them in the midst of a blizzard had grown into something enduring and strong. Later, in their own bed, Maggie traced the old scars on his chest, a nightly ritual that never grew old. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For answering the door that night, for giving me a chance, for standing beside me through everything." "Thank you," he replied. "For knocking, for refusing to run, for showing me I could be more than my past." Outside, a late winter storm was building, but inside they were warm and safe. The wind howled, reminding them of that first night, but now it was just nature's voice, not a threat. "Still think I'll drive you crazy?" Maggie asked with a smile. "Every day," Eli confirmed, pulling her close, "and I wouldn't have it any other way." As sleep took them, the storm raged on. But the house stood firm, a testament to what two people could build when they chose to stand together. In the morning, there would be chores and children and all the beautiful chaos of their life. But for now, in the darkness and warmth, there was only them. The story of Eli and Maggie Mercer would indeed be written down, passing into local legend. But more than that, it lived on in the children who learned to read in Maggie's school, in the families who worked their own land, in the community that had learned to stand together. And sometimes, on cold winter nights, when the wind howled just right, old-timers would tell the tale of the runaway bride who knocked on a gunfighter's door, and how love had conquered fear. Justice had defeated greed, and two lost souls had found their way home to each other. In the end, that's what mattered. Not the confrontations or the victories, but the quiet moments, a woman teaching a child to read, a man working his land in peace, a family gathered around the dinner table. These were the true triumphs, the real revolution. The West was changing, becoming something new. And in one small corner of Wyoming territory, that change had a name: hope. It had been born in a blizzard, tested by fire, and proved stronger than any man's greed or hate. And it all started with a knock on a door and two people brave enough to choose each other against all odds. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about this tale. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night channel. Give this video a like. And don't forget to hit the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means everything. And I can't wait to share more tales from the frontier with you.